I'm sitting here in what in Jesus' time was Sychar. In the Old Testament, it was Shechem. Behind me is Mount Moriah, where the Samaritans had established a place of worship. When the Israelites came out of the wilderness or out of their wanderings, they entered into the land, and God had them stand on Mount Gerizim, which is that mountain, and Mount Ebal on the other side of the valley, and speak the blessing and the curses over the nation. It was here that Abraham had bought a plot of land, and he had buried Sarah here. It was here that Rehoboam had come and gathered the people after Solomon's death, and Jeroboam had required of them unreasonable expectations, and Rehoboam had got the people together and rebelled against Solomon's son Jeroboam. And so a lot happens in this area, but for us significant event happens in the life of Jesus, because over here Jesus meets a Samaritan woman. And as you've just finished studying obedience to the kingdom agenda, I want to just use that story to highlight some of the things that we've spoken about. Obedience to the kingdom agenda. The kingdom agenda is where God's sovereign rule and authority is acknowledged and accepted. That's the kingdom agenda. And we're living in a world today where there are so many agendas, even within the church. And really, we've got to say that a lot of our church today is about building my own agenda so that I have my own empire. As you studied this material, we looked and we said that there were 5 key things. The first is an obedient heart to service. John chapter 4, when Jesus comes through this area, we read that he had to go through Samaria. Well, most of the Jews never went through Samaria. Jesus was being obedient to his Father's call and command. And so he travels through this area, an obedient heart to serve in the Father. The second thing that we noticed is that we have a lifestyle of grace and truth. I just love the way Jesus speaks into this woman's life. Jesus in every way could have come and rejected this woman, and in every way could have said, you've lived an adulterous life, and he could have come with truth and come with truth. But Jesus balances grace and truth, and that's the kingdom agenda. As we live in the world today, we mustn't come with just truth and law and law and law. Too much law means legalism. Too much grace means absolute freedom, and it can end up in promiscuity and lawlessness. And the kingdom agenda is grace and truth balanced beautifully. Thirdly, we notice that it's a message of hope and expectancy. I love the way that Jesus meets with her, and there's just hope and expectancy. She runs off to the village, which would have been about 500 or kilometer away from here, and she calls the rest of her village because she had found the truth. It's a message of hope and expectancy. Fourthly, it's a distinct value system. You know, Jesus wasn't saying to her, carry on living your life as you were. It was a different value system. And as we are bringing the kingdom agenda, it's a different value system. People cannot carry on living like they used to. And then the last thing we notice is that it is a global mission. Jesus comes through Samaria. Most Jews would never come through Samaria. Jesus speaks to a Samaritan woman. Most Jews would never speak to a Samaritan woman. And Jesus crosses cultural barriers, social norms. He crosses every barrier to make sure that this woman hears the gospel. If we are going to live a global mission, we've got to cross all those barriers. And so that's the kingdom agenda. But when we talk about this foundation, we're not just talking about a kingdom agenda, we're talking about obedience to the kingdom agenda. Obedience. What is obedience to the kingdom agenda? It's where individuals or communities of believers have submitted to the rule and authority of the kingdom. And it's where I choose to live by that kingdom. We will look at the centrality of the word next. And really, that's where I find the kingdom agenda. Not through my denomination, not through my orders and services written by some man through the last 200, 300, 400, 500 years. I find the agenda in the Word of God. We're living in a culture today that people are building their own kingdoms. And are we going to be different? Because one day when we stand before the Lord's going to want to know, John, did you live obediently to my kingdom agenda?